Frizzle fans. If you want some spoiler-free thoughts on this book, go check out my other video, but here we are going into all the spoilers and we're going digging into Alex's arc and the ending and all the things in between those. The thing that I was most excited for, most anxious for this book to get right was Alex's redemption arc or going full dark side. I knew it was likely going to go one way or the other, and I was kind of wonderfully surprised that we kind of got a middle ground in here, where throughout this book, Alex is still making the ruthless decisions. When Nimbus the Mage is in Alex's way politically, Alex twists fate a little bit to get Nimbus assassinated. It was not self-defense. Alex probably could have dealt with it less lethally if he had wanted to, but Alex is still playing hardball here. Alex is still going all out. However, he also has a little bit of a time where he has to say to himself, I have to pull back. I'm going too far for this. And the trigger for this event was genius. Because Alex had been going so hard, so ruthless for the past 2 books. If he had just woken up one day and been like, I'm done being evil now, time to be completely good again, back to book 1, Alex, that would have felt cheap. It needed something to push him. We needed something to push him into it. We needed some moment of realization and catharsis for him to realize that he needed to change. And the decision point that was the catalyst for this was over the Muggle security guys, which has been being set up for so many books now, where the magical government employs many non-magical security guys just to wave around guns and get sent into the dangerous situations that they don't want to waste any mages on. And Alex, for as long as he's been part of the magical government leading these strike teams, he has been against this kind of tactics of just wasting the lives of these people just because they're not magical. He has formed relationships and friendships with these people, with Sergeant Little and his crew. And so, in this battle, when Alex finds out that their tactics are going to be, yet again, putting these security guys in the line of fire just to kind of distract the enemy for a little bit, he protests. He says, this isn't right. And of course, the answer that comes back at him is like, well, how many people have you been killing for these past 2 books, you hypocrite? And because Alex had already drawn this line in the sand of, we do not waste these security guys' lives, he wasn't willing to cross that line again, even though he'd already been going around that line and killing other people for different reasons. But it made him have to reset. It made him think about all the lives he has been wasting in different ways. And this wake-up call for him came through a thing that he had already decided was a part of his personality. He had defined himself as the guy who doesn't waste the security guys' lives. And he still felt that, even though he had also now defined himself as the guy who was ruthless, who would do anything, who was out for power. And then when those 2 ideas of himself came head to head, he had to find a way to merge them, to find a middle ground, because he wasn't really willing to budge on the security guy issue. He'd already made that decision and made it part of his desire to be a good guy. And then Alex receives the second shock to his system, the death of Sonder. And I think this one was less thematically resonant and powerful as the security guys, but still an interesting trigger for him. Because Alex still cares about Sonder, even though their friendship has been ripped apart for many books now. But what kills Sonder? Dark Anne. Anne, who has been led to that place of darkness by her own choices and lusting after power. That is the road that Alex is also on. And seeing one of his friends kill another is another place where he has to step back and say, what am I doing with my life? Is this really the world I'm living in? Alex and Sonder's relationship tore itself apart because Alex was too ruthless for Sonder to handle. And now Sonder's life is broken because Anne is too ruthless. And this shock to Alex felt believable because I also still have some warm fuzzy feelings for Sonder from the first few books. I'm right there on board with Alex with the shock and grief of losing this character, even if he hasn't been the best friend for a while now. And another fascinating facet of Alex's arc here that I would love to discuss is him defining himself as him wanting to be respected, wanting to be powerful, and also wanting to be seen as a good guy. Because throughout the series, Alex has not really been respected by other people. He has been the weak link, the one that people are always underestimating in the magical world. And then over the past few books, he's really been fighting against that because he wants to be respected and listened to. We can even see this in the way that he interacts with Anne near the end of this book, that he's like, why didn't you just listen to me? Come on. He wants people to see him as he sees himself, which is capable, which is smart, which is someone you should listen to. And so, to reach that, he's been searching for power and control over people, and he has gained a lot of that. and he has gained the respect. Now he's on equal with the council, with Richard. He finally realizes that he doesn't have to be afraid of Richard because he's come this far. But then on the other side, we have Alex wanting to be a good guy, wanting to be seen as a good guy, and wanting to make those kind of decisions. Part of how he's defined himself is that he's not Richard. Richard is the one lusting after power. Richard is the one that doesn't care about how other people are hurt because of his own actions. And Alex has broken away from Richard many years ago. He is the anti-Richard. He is anti-Dark Mage. And then, never mind, because he wants to lust after power anyway. So we see the inner conflict of Alex Verus. And in Risen Book 12, Alex finally manages to balance these two. Alex does gain incredible respect and power in the magical community, politically and literally. He gets to lead the Light's armies and find their trust, and is actually pretty good at it. And then he also gets to be seen as the good guy, and here we see Alex rescues and fosters the ex-Dark apprentice, Ji-young. And she is like an echo of what Alex was a decade ago. Was distancing himself from his evil master Richard. Was trying to redefine himself and find his own place in the magical world as a good guy. And so Alex is delighted when Ji-young decides to join the team, decides to participate, decides to continue to be part of the good guys. Alex speculates a few times, like, why is Ji-young hanging around us? Why hasn't she skedaddled and found her own way? And he answers himself that it's probably because she's looking at a new way to live and is curious about it, is curious about why Alex is doing the things he is doing. And whether or not this is actually Ji-young's motivation, it's an insight into Alex's character that this is the explanation that he latches onto. Because he wants to be a mentor, he wants people to say that he's a good guy. He wants people to be able to be inspired by him, to break away from the destructive mindset of being a dark mage and not caring about the impact you have on the world. Because Alex wants to be a good guy, and I think even more importantly, he wants to be known as a good guy. He wants that reputation. Also, at the same time, he wants the reputation that he is a person you do not want to mess with because he needs to be respected and important, and it's really hard for him to find both, and yet somehow in this book, he kind of does find both, which is another reason why this book's ending is fantastic, because it's a conclusion to both of these ongoing character tracks' motivations. But even as Alex, our baby, our main character, gets an awesome arc and balance to his personality in this book, I was pretty disappointed with the way that Anne's arc was handled in this book. Anne is Alex's girlfriend, and like Alex, she has gone in and out of dark side, light side, had various emotional, mental problems, etc. And though she does get a resolution in this book, as I've discussed in reviews of these books before, I felt like her emotional resolution was too pushed by Alex. Instead of her driving her own choices and how her life goes, it felt too much like Alex was just pushing her into choices. Which you could argue makes Alex an even more active main character, usually considered a good thing. But I feel like it really weakens Anne to the point of terribleness, where it feels like her character is being wasted because she doesn't get her own arc. She gets an arc shoved on her by Alex, which isn't based on her own decisions, which isn't based on her own personal growth, which is what we want to see in character-driven stories anyway. And you might be wondering, well, why is this even a problem? I would say there are two main reasons. One, it's because in our sexist society, we tend to tell sexist stories, and this is a part of that. Where Anne, a woman, is getting her arc and decisions made by a man. And that's kind of portrayed as the way things should go in these books. That's just Alex being an awesome hero is helping out Anne do her own arc. No thanks. But a second, and arguably even more important reason, is that it makes Anne's arc weaker when it's not driven by her herself. Because a character arc is built out of that character learning, that character getting better, that character improving, that character making decisions that they wouldn't have made at the beginning of the book. So if Anne's big pivotal decisions are just kind of driven at her, pushed on her by Alex, then she isn't showing how she's learning. She isn't showing how the events of the 12-book series have affected her. And she isn't her own engaging character. And this bothers me even more because it would have been such an easy fix. You don't need to completely redo all of the scenes with Anne and Alex in them. You can just do a little bit of tweaking, where Anne is just a little bit more active, a little bit more deciding to do these things. And sure, Alex can encourage her, but he doesn't need to force her into anything. You know? Now let's talk about that ending. So right before the epilogue of this book, Alex dies. While I was reading, I knew how long I had left in the book, and so I sincerely suspected that Alex was not really dead. However, when he died, I did think about it, and I thought, I am satisfied with the series. This was a good ending. Which is a little bit like we got to have our cake and eat it too. Because even if Alex had died, we would have gotten a satisfying conclusion to his story. It was all wrapped up. It was beautiful. And now there could be even future stories about the way that this impacted other people. Alex had found the end of his journey. And he didn't die in the end, which is fun, because now I can better imagine a happy future of him and Anne living together. But even if he had died, it would have been okay. Because the book series had so well crafted every moment up to that it didn't just feel like a cheap thing. It felt like he had accomplished everything he had set out to do, and it was okay for it to end now. But just to be clear, I am glad he survived, and I'm even glad with the way it happened, because it was surprising to me. I did not expect him to go full Fate Weaver. What I expected to happen, here was my prediction, was that him and Anne would go into Elsewhere, and Anne would extract the Fate Weaver from him and heal him up. Because it has been set up for books that in Elsewhere, you can do pretty much any healing and body modification you want, as long as you have a good understanding of the human body. There is no magical limitation to it. Anne has a perfect understanding of the human body. She could do whatever she wanted there. And this turnaround of my expectations and reality just made the death that more convincing for a few seconds. Because they hadn't made it to Elsewhere, because they weren't going down that route of obvious conclusion. So now Alex and Anne are retired and living happily by themselves, and that's fun to imagine. In reality, I think for these characters, they're not going to stay retired for very long. They're both too active. But it's still nice to think about them making that decision, because it does feel like they have afforded themselves this peace that they were needing. That they will likely get themselves in and out of new messes, but it has wrapped up. They've decided to stay out of politics for now. And that is their happy ending. And if you're interested in buying various t-shirts and other things based on Alex Verus and other fandoms, please go check out my store. There's a link in the doobly-doo below. So, comment with an hourglass emoji if you made it to the end of the video, and thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this book. I need people to talk to about this book, please.